levels. Yeah, and also at least a band 4 in the Malaysian University English test or the MUAT exam, and it is similar to the IELTS exam. It tests candidates in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And a band 4 is perhaps similar to the B1 or B2 level on the CEFR Common European Framework. In this program, I teach 2 courses in addition to other postgraduate teaching commitments. These slides provide a summary of how the undergraduate courses were taught before the pandemic and during the pandemic, and I will explain them in a little more detail in the next slide. This slide shows the teaching and learning and assessment approaches that I undertook before the pandemic. Every week I met my students for 3 hours face-to-face class, and one semester is about 14 weeks. And being a blended practitioner, the face-to-face teaching was supported with ELIP. ELIP, as shown in, let me show you ELIP, a snapshot of ELIP is shown on the slide. This is a Moodle platform, which is the official learning management system provided by UNIMAS to all lecturers and students. So before the pandemic, as I said, it was supported by ELIT and combined with the relevant online sources using Web 2.0 tools like OneDrive, Google Drive, Kahoot, Padlet, and so on. And I also gathered students' feedback from time to time. And being in class, we could see the students' body language and also get verbal feedback from them. There is also a feedback function in the ELIP platform, and that was used occasionally to gather feedback from the students. In terms of assessment, they were continuous assessments and also final exam. The continuous assessment carried 60%, includes quizzes, assignments, and a project. And the final assessment or the final exam consisted of multiple choice questions and short answer questions, which carried 40%. In Malaysia, the MCO was implemented on the 18th of March 2020, as we all know. Initially, we were not too worried as we expected to resume teaching and learning activities as usual once the MCO ends. However, to our surprise, extensions to the MCO were announced. Now, this is when we started to realize that we may not be able to see our students and accepted the reality that we will not be able to resume classes face-to-face as before. At the same time, just like many of you, I started to attend webinars offered by UNIMAS and also other local universities, as well as international institutions, to update my knowledge. So soon we accepted the fact that we have to make a fast transition from the very familiar face-to-face teaching to remote teaching, a territory that we were not familiar, from the familiar to the unfamiliar. So my colleagues and I started to have discussions on how we could proceed with our classes fully online. For your information, the students who are taking and were taking and are taking the classes are located all over Malaysia. Some of them live in urban areas and some in isolated remote areas like in longhouses in Sabah and Sarawak. Students in the remote areas have severe internet challenges, as mentioned by Dato' Amar Michael Mani during the opening address. Even students who live in cities face various challenges with their parents working from home and siblings accessing the devices and Wi-Fi at the same time. So UNIMAS, my university, encouraged students facing device and internet challenges and other related challenges to come and stay on campus. Now, this slightly reduced my anxiety about the practicality of the remote teaching. At the same time, the internet line at UNIMAS was strengthened and the official learning management system, which is ELIP that I mentioned before, was enhanced with additional features. Like many of you, I too equipped myself with webcams, microphones, etc. I learned how to fit them on my home and office PCs, laptop, and so on. Then downloaded and got myself familiar with the various web conferencing platforms, tested them with our colleagues and family members as my specimen. I was beginning to see some light. In this slide, I'm showing how the courses were taught during the pandemic, which is the new normal. So I had full online. When we went full online, I started using Microsoft Teams as being used in this conference. Webex, got myself familiar with Google Meet, as well as Zoom and so on. So my synchronous live sessions usually is about 40 minutes to an hour only, and they were video recordings made available in Elite. Now these synchronous sessions were followed up with synchronous and asynchronous activities and tasks, again supported by UNIMAS LMS, the enhanced version, and combined with more relevant online sources. So this time I'm more picky about what are the online sources that I am making available for the students, because they spend quite a long time online and I don't want them to spend too much time on screen. And of course, OneDrive and Google Drive and so on were used as well. Now, previously, during the old normal face-to-face session, of course, I used ELIP to collect the students' feedback, but it was done more frequently during the pandemic, and it was done in a more systematic manner. Now, in relation to the assessment, the quizzes were done, assignments, yes, project, yes, but the final exam was removed, and the more marks were given to the alternative assessments, which are part of the continuous assessment. The video recordings were made available considering the fact that students may face unstable internet connectivity. This also enables permanency to the delivery, and the students could watch the recording at their leisure at any time, unlike the face-to-face class delivery. Although feedback from students were gathered, like I said before, during the old normal, it was done more frequently to have a better understanding of the students' learning experience. One of the major concerns was engagement with the students and the effectiveness of the full online teaching. Unlike face-to-face physical classes, we are not able to see the twinkle in our students' eyes, neither could we see their body language. Thus, to ensure engagement with students for effective learning, I opened up various communication channels in addition to ELIP, like WhatsApp group, and so on. In an effort to ensure quality teaching and learning, I also explored other tools and thought harder to make learning engaging and meaningful for the students. The full online teaching, as I said just now, offered new opportunities. And here is an example of a borderless class that I conducted for my Psychology of Learning course. After completing the topic on child language acquisition and moving on to second language learning and acquisition, I invited a polyglot. His name is Daniel Speziale. He's an Italian, to join my class, and my students joined the live chat with Daniel. Daniel speaks 15 languages, reads, writes, and speaks 15 languages. For example, Bahasa Malaysia, Mandarin, Tamil, English, Arabic, Hindi, and so on. Yeah? So students had the opportunity to interact live with Daniel the polyglot, and under the old normal, to fly down Daniel from Italy would have been very expensive and may not have been possible. But under the new normal, it did not cost a single cent, just the willingness of Daniel and the devices that we already have. Now, after these activities, I gathered feedback from my students as usual, and they said that the chat with Daniel created a significant impact on the students, and they were inspired. In fact, I too got inspired. The students also thought more critically about the language learning and acquisition theories that they have learned in the class. Here is an excerpt just now. These are the samples of feedback given by students. And here is a sample excerpt. One of the students said that it was inspiring. I'm amazed of how he can learn so many languages, even though he's an Italian. Not only he can speak BM, Mandarin, and Tamil, etc., he can also write poem as well. I learned that as long as we are willing to learn and be open-minded, we can learn other languages. Now here is a sharing by student in the social media, Instagram, about their experience interacting with Daniel. This is another example of an activity made possible by the full online teaching and learning. In my Sounds of English course, after the students learned the 44 English consonants and vowel sounds and symbols, I got my students to join me in an English pronunciation workshop for school students, and my own students joined as facilitators. Now, this provided opportunity for my undergraduates to apply the knowledge learned and at the same time contribute to the community. This also created an awareness among the students that they don't need to wait until they start working and earning to contribute to the community. Again, I collected feedback from both my students and also the school student using a simple Google form, and it shows that the student the involvement as facilitators in the pronunciation workshop for the school students gave my students a great sense of satisfaction. And the school students also said that they benefited much from the workshop. In the old normal, such a workshop could also be done, of course, but it would have taken more time and effort, especially in transporting the students from the university to the school. But we just managed to do this at the comfort of where everyone is located with the existing devices that we have. Moving on to the assessments. First, I will explain the quizzes, the traditional assessment with multiple choice question items. Now, before every quiz, students were informed at least 2 weeks earlier and reminded in the elite and also via the WhatsApp group so that they can go to a place where the internet is stable to take the quiz. There were 3 quizzes and each one contributed 10% to the 100% assessment in the course. The quiz was done using the Unimas Elite, and this allowed the questions and the option within the question to be presented in a random order. Also, the time given was taken into consideration, about 15 to 20 seconds per question. And this reduces the chances of copying, the randomization of the question, and also the options within each question. So the questions were made online, and it enables immediate display of students' performance. Also, students can review their responses. So it became more like an assessment for learning. Let me show you um, how the students could review their responses. So the students, immediately after finishing the quiz, the students can see their results and look at which are the questions that they got correct and which one they did not get right, and they can review their attempt for each of the questions, yeah, and see the correct responses as well. So it became an assessment as a learning. The feedback after the quiz, again, the feedback were gathered from the students. The feedback was taken into account in planning future quizzes. For example, one of the students mentioned about blackout while taking the quiz, but luckily he or she had the extra internet quota and managed to submit. But there were also students who have messaged me and informed that they have vaccination appointment and other emergencies. Now, having these online quizzes enables me to reactivate the quiz with parallel questions from the question banks, which are already included in the elite quiz. Now, the second assessment that I would like to share with you is the modified short answer question. Although the task given was similar to the one that was given during the old normal, in the new normal, the instruction and the task description were made clearer, mainly because the students do not have as much access to me as they had during class and also while they're walking around in the building at the faculty. And the task description and instruction were included in the OneDrive so that it enables easy editing. So when the students are not clear about any of the instruction and they message or they call me, I can immediately go to the OneDrive and make it clearer, and the rest of the students can access it at the same time. Options were also given to the students whether they want to work individually or they want to work in pair, because like I said, some of them have internet access challenges and so on. They may not be able to work in pairs, right? And the submission was done completely paperless. Here is the task. Let me show you the task. As I said, it was placed in the OneDrive, which enables easy editing. So this is the task, the description. And if the students, for example, are unclear about something or there is a change in the deadline, for example, we can easily inform the students by typing in new deadline. So this is one of the advantages of placing it here, right? New deadline, for example, we can say new deadline, whatever the date is, yeah? Okay, right. So in this task short, I call it modified short answer question because a series of short answer questions are there and the mark allocation is embedded into it, and a sample of response is also given to the students. Why? Because they are in first year, first semester, and this is the first assignment that they are doing for a course. Here are some feedback about the task that was given. They said that the instruction given and the task given was clear, and they learned more and found new resources while working on the task. And the sample that was made available for the student was served as a useful guide. And they said that, as you can see, one of the students said, we are new students, first degree for the first time doing an assignment. So it made me clearer of the expectation, my expectation of how or to what extent the responses need to include what kind of information in the assignment that was given to the students. And these are some of the feedback given on the rubric, right? Some of the students said that they were helpful and so on. And you can see a couple of students also gave suggestions for consideration. The description should have more marks, and also the diagram could be given more marks. So this helps me to reflect and further improve on the rubric. The students take on the role of equal partners. They learn from me. At the same time, I learn a lot from them too. After the submission of all the tasks, the students' submissions can be used for follow-up teaching and learning activity. So what I did was I compiled the students' submission and got them to do peer evaluation. Here are examples of peer evaluation feedback given by my student for their peer submission. The feedback received from the students regarding the activity where they were asked to give peer feedback shows that they learn to pay more attention to details. They could examine their own mistakes. In fact, one student mentioned that although it was a tedious thing to do, it really helps enhance understanding of the subject matter. Moving on, I'm showing you in this slide the third assessment, which is an alternative assessment, very similar to the one given during the old normal, but what the students did was to present it in class. So they received immediate feedback during the class, but it was kind of a rush due to the limited time. Also, because they presented it orally in class, they didn't get much opportunity to showcase their ICT skills. Right? Let me show you the task. Again, it was put in the OneDrive. So in these tasks, the students basically towards the end of the class, they focus on variations in English pronunciations. Yeah. So the students were given the opportunity to work on this assignment where they get to choose to compare RP and another variety of English pronunciation. So they were given options. And they can also choose any other variety that they would like to work on, for example, Singapore English and so on. Um, and they can work either individually or they can even work in pairs or in small groups of 3. And the task was weighted accordingly. And they were also given options for the submission format or the response format. They can use PowerPoint with audio or YouTube, Prezi, TikTok, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And the rubric was also given to them to guide them and also to self-direct their learning, to take responsibility for learning. Since we cannot be there all the time to provide feedback for the students, this serves like a checklist for them, yeah, as a reference point and checklist. And you can see the students' work were mind-blowing. They did various submissions on African English, comparing RP with African American English, Australian English, Canadian English, Korean English, Malaysian English, and so on and so forth. So many different kinds of submissions, yeah? And these can be easily used as teaching learning materials. Now let me show you an example of a submission by student. So this is a submission, an example of a submission from a student. So this can be used as teaching learning material in the future. And the students also have the opportunities to showcase their enhanced ICT skills. Just like how we have enhanced our ICT skills, the students also have learned new ICT skills, and this is giving them an opportunity to practice the 21st century learning skills. So during the pandemic, technology accelerated and became more user-friendly. Our learning accelerated. What would have taken 10 to 15 years, we have learned in a matter of just a few months. We have put in extra effort to ensure the quality of education, that quality education is provided for our students. Although we came into full online teaching, partially blindfolded. I'm saying partially blindfolded because a number of us were already accustomed to blended teaching and learning, which is a combination of face-to-face teaching with online support. Now, the need for full online teaching and learning and assessment has made us to reflect on our teaching, rethink, and we have become even stronger in creating better assessments which are of higher validity, moving from more traditional assessment to more performance-based alternative assessments, and creating rubrics which are much more clearer to the students. The task descriptions are clear, the instructions are clear, and they are placed in OneDrive, as I said just now, which enables editing. And detailed rubric is provided for students' constant reference. Now, we also provide options to the students where they could work individually or in pair or even in small groups, but it's weighted accordingly according to the human capital that is working on a particular task. And the students were also given the freedom to respond in various formats and enables creative outputs. Now, this also helps them to utilize their enhanced ICT skills. The assessments also became greener assessments, has gone completely paperless. At this juncture, I would also like to share that the knowledge and the experiences gained from online teaching of the courses taught contribute to an academic's career development. Now, in this slide, I'm showing you the EduTour program, which is an international student mobility program that my team and I have been conducting since 2018 with participants from Utsunomiya University, Japan. We started this in 2018 and we have carried it out in 2019 and 2020 successfully here on UNIMA's campus, with increasing number of participants from both sides of the university, and UNIMA students serve as buddies. This program includes English language classes, visits to the faculties in UNIMAS, visits to places of interest in Kuching. They get a chance to have a recreational activities, interact with Malaysian school students, and so on and so forth. So the students have benefited a lot from this program. Come 2021, the travel restrictions imposed during the COVID-19 pandemic almost brought EduTour to a complete stop. We thought we cannot carry on with EduTour 2021. However, due to the multiple benefits that it offers and the request from UU or Utsunomiya students, our partner university students, and also UNIMA students, and encouraged by the confidence gained in conducting face-to-face EduTour with my team, we decided to take up the challenge and offer EduTour virtually in 2021. So we call the new version, the virtual version of the editor, the e-editor, and it was successfully conducted in February 2021. All from the experiences, knowledge, and the confidence gained through online teaching, full online teaching under the new norm. In this slide, you can see the coverage that we obtained from the media for conducting the course both in Japan and also in Malaysia. This is an article in the Star newspaper, and this one in Sarawak, the New Sarawak Tribune, and also Suara Sarawak. Yeah. Due to its uniqueness, this editorial program was granted intellectual property rights, and we also received the commercialization status. In fact, it was presented in the Seoul exhibition fair 2021 recently. And we are now getting ready for e-editor 2022. There is still demand for it because we have successfully conducted it in 2021. There have been requests to have it in 2022, and we have already started our meeting and started working on the content of it in 2022. So to sum up, I would say, if we take a step back and get a bird eye view of what we would realize that the time that we have during the physical class with students, where we could see the students twinkle in the eye, in the students' eyes and their body language and interact with them, is really precious. And in the future, it should be utilized to conduct teaching, learning activities that are best done in a physical class, especially activities that involves social interaction and active collaboration among the students and also with the instructor, as mentioned by Dato' Amal during the opening ceremony of the conference. There are a lot of things, a lot of approaches, methodologies, best practices from face-to-face learning, teaching and learning that we have experienced and we know that they work effectively in a face-to-face class. And from the online teaching learning experiences, we have also discovered new things, enhanced ICT skills, more technically equipped. We have trialed with new methodologies, new approaches to teaching, new activities, discovered new tools for teaching and learning and engaging with students. So we can actually balance face-to-face teaching with online teaching and learning and strike a balance between on-screen as well as off-screen teaching, learning, and assessment activities. So I would say that the best practices from face-to-face teaching and the best practices from full online teaching should be combined and put to good use to make the future teaching and learning as well as assessment, which is an important integral part of teaching and learning, go beyond normal when we return to normalcy. And with that message, we still have time for discussion. I would like to say a big thank you. Over to you, MC.
Right. Thank you, Associate Professor Dr. Soba. Right. So now I will open the floor for questions. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Soba? From a live audience as well as our online participants? I have a question for Dr. Soba. So my question here is that there's a comment made by one of the participants saying that your overall experience shared was very insightful and overall very positive. So do you, by any chance, have faced any challenges in adapting or developing assessments for remote teaching during the pandemic?
That's a very good question. Assessment is something that is of big interest to me. Hello, uh,
Yes.
there is echo. I'm just wondering why the echo. Yeah. Okay. So, did I face challenges in constructing the assessments? I wouldn't really call it challenges. I think it gave me an opportunity to think of alternative ways of assessing the students. And in the process of doing that, what I have discovered is we can create even better assessments. As I've shown just now, make the task clearer, the instructions clearer, the rubrics even more stronger, and it does not need to be paper and pen based submission. Allow the students to submit online. Why? Because it gives permanency. You can have a clearer access to the students' progress. For example, of course, presentation in class with direct eye contact with audience and projection of voice and speaking without text and all are important skills that we need to develop in our students. But getting them to submit a presentation online provides an opportunity for the students to utilize and be creative in using the various tools that are available, and they've also learned a lot in the last couple of years. And also it creates a tangible product for us to trace the students' progress. So I would say challenges in creating assessment, it wasn't really challenging, but I think the assessments created were even more beneficial, and the move from the traditional assessment to alternative assessment was made even greater due to the pandemic, because we know that with traditional assessments, the chances of students copying will be higher, number one. Number two is it may create unfairness, because internet stability is a challenge. So if we give MCQ questions and things like that, many students may not be able to work on it because of their internet stability. So giving alternative assessments is more beneficial for the students, and I think it makes the learning even more meaningful. And we know that assessment drives learning. So when a particular task is assessed, students naturally tend to put in extra effort. Yeah, I hope that response is acceptable or clearly explains how I feel about the assessments that were done during the pandemic, during the new normal. Over to you, MC.
The question, one more question, which is, what is the likelihood of implementing an e-edu tour post-pandemic, and would it be a comparable, engaging experience compared to a face-to-face tour?
All right, thank you again. It's a wonderful question as well. We are already thinking along that line. Of course, come February 2022, we are still planning for an online edu tour, which is e-edu tour 2022. But in 2023, it's highly, and hopefully we will be able to have the students on campus as well. But what we have learned is there are certain activities that can be conducted online, virtually. So in our planning, we are going to include sessions before the students come here physically, we will have a few sessions while they are still in Japan, and they will come here, and then because the experience of tasting the durian, for example, or the rambutan, and also interacting and playing together with their buddies, playing sepak takraw or futsal, and having a karaoke session together, and going and visiting the Kampung Budaya, walking on the Darul Hana bridge is not the same when we do it virtually. So it is important to have that physical presence here to experience the whole thing. So the 2023 Edu Tour would be a combination of both face-to-face visit to Kuching, as well as preceded by interactions before they come here, and also follow up with post Edu Tour interactions. Over to you, NC.
Experience that can't be replaced with an online experience. Do we have any more questions from the audience? No. Right, so I think that's it. Thank you so much, Associate Professor Dr. Soba, for the wonderful speech.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great conference, and I'm really learning so much from all of you as well. Wishing you all the best.
Right, so Dr. Soba, can you stay on the line, please? I would like to have all the virtual participants to turn on your camera for a while so that we could take a group photo for online participants only, sorry.
Wow, that's nice. That's nice.
Yeah, so for those who are online, can you please turn on your camera so we could take a group photo? Thank you. Is everyone on? All right. Great. Hello. Good to see everyone online. Okay, so I guess we shall take the photo now. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, do we need one more? Okay, we're good. All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce the second plenary speaker for the day, Professor Dr. Ruslan Abdul Rahim from Akademi Seni Budaya dan Warisan Kebangsaan, Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Malaysia, will be delivering the second plenary speech titled Theory and Practice for Social Betterment. Unfortunately, Professor Dr. Ruslan is unable to join us in real time, so we will be playing a pre-recorded video of his speech.
Greetings and greets everyone. Meets everyone here in good health, and please stay safe. The pandemic isn't just quite over yet. It is a long run, but I think to move on, as we all are right now, moving on. I think I would just like to actually take a more leading role rather than just being users at the end of the day. I think we have to take a more what you call a substantive in this for the greetings here, greets everyone, meets everyone here in good health, and please stay safe. We're in it. The pandemic isn't just quite over yet. We're in this for the long run. But I think to move on, as we all are right now, moving on, I think I'd just like to again take this opportunity to thank all the organizers of the conference. One interesting point I've observed, okay, this past 1.5, well, slightly over 1.5 years of going through this pandemic, I think it's made all of us in the teaching industry, higher education, um, a lot more reflective. I think we've seen, we're experiencing a lot of new emergent trends, a lot of new buzzwords that's come out, and the presence online hasn't been more prevalent, as it were, for this past 1.5 years. And we've seen that the landscape is obviously changing. Things have gone from step to step, and I can't help but reflect um, how I mentioned about what I mentioned 2 years ago, well, 2.5 years ago, actually, in 2018, mid 2018, about how Malaysia is also following up, keeping up with what Japan introduced at that time. In particular, was Society 5.0. That means we're moving towards from a information society into a super smart society by using technology. And the creative arts in Malaysia is also part and parcel of that. And I think this is something that we really, really need to absorb and understand, that this is already part and parcel of the very fabric of our society right now. Malaysia, in its own pace, okay, is moving towards that. And I think in teaching or the higher education of art and design is also more so into that also. Um, but let me just add on also. I think the theme here, what I wanted to emphasize on, is about inclusivity. I'm going to show a few videos at the end of this recording. Okay, hopefully you can actually appreciate what I'm trying to sort of like put across here. But I think in order for the art and design community to be what you call inclusive with society as a whole, I think this is where we need to actually look back at our practice and actually move up from, as what I mentioned, from our comfort zone of looking at all things aesthetic and just functional, but also how it can play a more meaningful and holistic role uh, for the betterment of society. There are examples, I think, right now. I'll just quote a few, what you call for those of you who are into what you call the maker society or the maker community, whereby you talk about 3D printing, which coincidentally I'm also, just let me quickly patch this over here. Okay, which I'm also taking the opportunity to teach myself a bit about the 3D printing technology. I'm a bit late, I know that, but I think it's an interesting, what you call a step to what you call innovation, and again about using technology. Okay, what's interesting about fabrication actually of materials or in design right now is that we're not just no longer just what you call, how should I say, limited to what you call found on or nature-based materials. There's a lot of what you call synthetic materials out there, which is environmentally safe. So again, looking at that, I think this is where we in the creative arts, art and design, I think actually, okay, can actually take a more leading role rather than just being users at the end of the day. I think we have to take a more what you call a substantive position to make our stand, and also be aware that whatever we do right now should gear towards the betterment of society. Now there are communities out there worldwide over, okay, they are helping the health workers to produce, for example, stencils for face masks. Okay, so again, you're talking about coming with new designs, and again helping the community. I think this is something that we can actually look at and actually reflect upon. And again, like I said, where our practice in the creative arts and design also, where our practice in creative arts can actually be more meaningful to society. Okay, and actually what's happening right now, from what I can see, actually, this calls right down to, how shall I say, where does this come from? Okay, why do we need to actually look into being more what you call involved with society, and say we as in the creative arts. I think it's not so much creativity as a service also, but I think more of a contributive service. And again, the examples that I'm going to show at the end of my talk, at the end of the session, I think would clearly demonstrate that. You've got what you call teachers, ex-teachers who taught themselves 3D printing and have been actively producing prosthetics for children who are in need of arms or legs, artificial limbs. Okay, and they're using what you call a 3D printing technology just to produce that. And this is not, I'm talking about something that's far flung overseas and all that. It is happening and has happened. Okay, right here in Malaysia. It's a very interesting video. I think it's something that you can actually share. I mean, you can actually look at something that we can actually reflect upon and look at that. Now, the other example is about another the medical faculty, the medical fraternity in my university. They've paired up with a virtual reality artist or designer and come up with a what you call a 3D, or not 3D actually, how should I say that, augmented reality, okay, for as a tool for stroke victim, heart stroke victims, okay, to do what you call physiotherapy. One of the problems is that when you have heart stroke victims, they need to one of the phase of recovery is about having to do how shall I say, having to do physiotherapy. Now, one of the things is about logistics. Some of them are based not near the hospital, very, very far away. So these are things that need to be looked upon into. And it's very interesting. I think the newsreel can actually show, well, don't the newsreel, the video can actually show you how an augmented reality designer can actually work together with a doctor, medical doctor, and work with the patient and come up with that. So again, examples, homegrown examples of how inclusivity is relevant to the creative arts, especially in our teaching. Now, why I keep on mentioning about our teaching or higher education of art and design. I think it's time for us to really, really look back. I'll share with all you also at the end of this slot, yeah, a slot about a chart which I found out, which I've recently been looking at, and I'm still looking at. Actually, I'm trying to come up with new initiatives or new ideas. Okay, I'm trying to brainstorm with certain individuals. If you realize that the curriculum that or the teaching of art and design, formal art education in Malaysia, there's a strong model which we refer to historically. It's from the Bauhaus model. Okay, now just for your information, that model was introduced in 1921. This is already 2021. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying that something that's 100 years old is bad. It's not about that. But I think we need to relook in light of what is happening right now and what has been developing, okay, for the future. I'm looking at possibly a hybrid of certain elements which we can talk about. A few other universities have come up with interesting modules or what you call versions of teaching art and design. I think or after the post-conference sessions, if you can go online. I think something very interesting. I think we really need to look into it and see where is the future curriculum of the creative arts can head to. Something that we can really bear in time. Okay, I think my timer here shows that I've already gone into my 11th minute. So the next 3 or 4 minutes, I think please enjoy the videos, which I'm going to share with you, and to show, again to further illustrate how important it is. For the creative arts to be inclusive, work with society. I think that's very, very important. So with that, again, like thank you very much for your time, and please excuse all the little technical glitches what you see on this video. But I hope that this is something that that we can really it's food for thought, and actually we have to really look forward, way forward into the future and see what holds for us, and it's up to us to determine it actually from the creative arts. Okay, and so with that, I think I'd just like to well leave everyone right now with to enjoy the movies and short movies actually, and yeah, I'll see you all very, very soon. So in the meantime, please stay well and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Muda memang tak terima. Aku Pagi tu elok je. Bila kena macam sakit macam tu, serba salah lah. Sana tak kena, sini tak kena. Niat di hati ya. Saya rindu nak solat. Hari Raya tahun ni tak bermakna kalau tak boleh solat.
From our experience, pesakit ramai tidak dapat memenuhi our program akibat daripada mereka tak dapat datang pada kekerapan yang diperlukan.
Kalau nak pergi ke PCO tu ambil masa lah, jaraknya sangat jauh lah.
Orang pergi berdua lah dengan ayah, malas lah nak pergi. Kata letih, kata nak tunggu lama lagi. Pergilah 2 orang, mak nak ikut.
Fizio dengan OT dia tak boleh bawa balik rumah dia kata. Tetapi kalau lah ada benda ni kat rumah kan bagus. Hari-hari saya boleh guna. Encik Mazin had expressed lah. We want to bring therapy out from the hospital so that accessibility tu ada. I was exposed dengan virtual reality and so this is where I got in touch with Mosho Fixo, with my younger brother.
Tak expect jauh macam ni, tapi kita dah nampak macam memang betul masuk ke dalam ni. Harap-harap tak sesat lah. VR is one of the ways yang kita can bring the treatment to their houses in a way of bringing the technology and accessibility to a person that is in need. I explain Cik Mazin VR ni apa, tunjuk dia headset tu rupa macam mana kan. Nampak pelik sikit boleh je? Boleh. I was a bit worried lah sebab this is the first time we're testing it out off-site with a patient, a real patient. Tapi Alhamdulillah tengok Cik Mazin macam eager. Bila kita tahu benda tu pun kita pun rasa okey, jom kita try benda ni. There's this module Back to Kampung kita namakan. Kenapa kita buat nama Back to Kampung is to gain that familiarity lah. So you want them to be comfortable with the situation. So we were quite surprised masa tu. Cik Mazin dapat transfer all those eggs in a very quick time lah. That's a good sign lah that he's progressively improve lah. Bila kita tengok orang at his age pakai VR, wish, orang umur macam dia ni pun okey main VR rupanya. His willingness to get better is what drives him to do all these things. I tabik lah dia punya acceptance to this.
Kalau rapat sikit kaki, tak boleh.
Kita nampak keinginan dia untuk mencuba. Apa doktor rasa yang saya perlu buat ni, saya akan buat.
Bila kita tanya dia pun kenapa Cik buat, Cik buat saya sebut semangat. Semangat kena ada, semangat kena ada, semangat kena ada.
Dia tak pernah putus asa, tak pernah nak mengalah.
Dia akan cuba apa-apa cara pun asalkan dia boleh.
Seronok tak nak explore dunia ni?
Macam Star Wars.
So, I think it's a good push and pull effort here jugalah. With us wanting this to happen and dia pun nak wanting to get better. Somewhat a rare occasion lah to see at his age with this semangat lah. I mean, seeing Cik Mazin, he inspires me to do even more.
Alhamdulillah, kalau tak ada semangat daripada kawan-kawan, saya tak ada macam ni. Mula tu memang patah semangat lah. Tak boleh. Tapi tak boleh. Kena kuat. Setiap kali solat doa, setiap kali solat doa. Pulihkan kita. Pulihkan 3 kali supaya kita dapat solat. Nyimpan dalam hati saya, kalau boleh nak macam biasa balik. Kita kena yakin, semangat dan tak putus asa. Kena buat dia sampai lambat. Dan raya ni paling bermakna bagi saya. Jadi apa ajak saya tu tercapai. Tak pernah lagi saya membuat tangan yang sekecil ini.
Saya ada 3 orang anak. Yang kecil sekali tu Muhammad Zikri Ramadan. Saya selalu duduk fikir dia macam mana dia membesar nanti sebab daripada lahir tu doktor letak kat atas dia memang dah tangan dia macam tu lah. Kalau saya bawa dia pergi pasar ke, mesti ada budak-budak akan kata, mak tu adik tu tak ada tangan. Dia cakap macam tu lah. Saya dengar je.
Nama saya Sujana bin Muhammad Rajab atau dikenali sebagai Pak Su. Mereka dah mencetak tangan-tangan prostetik menggunakan mesin cetak 3D lah. Khususnya kepada kanak-kanak OKU. Zikri ni satu kes yang mana kita nak cuba. Lilit dia 6, mana 6, 12 juga. Tak pernah lagi saya membuat tangan yang sekecil ini. Okey, depan lebih kurang 9. 1, 2, 3. Habis ni. Sebenarnya saya tak memilih siapa yang saya nak bantu dan kita tak akan meminta sebarang bayaran dan kita akan minta bantuan orang untuk menyediakan material. Gede. Pada mulanya memanglah saya akui memang saya tak ada basic langsung dalam reka bentuk 3D. Tapi internet jugalah yang membantu saya mempelajari engineering elektronik. Jadi saya amat berterima kasihlah kepada University of Google yang mana profesor-profesornya adalah dari YouTube yang banyak membantu saya untuk belajar menggunakan 3D printer untuk membantu kanak-kanak OKU. Saya dulu seorang guru, jadi kanak-kanak ni menjadi inspirasi kepada saya. Kalau dia tak ada tangan, takkan kita nak biarkan dia macam tu saja. Assalamualaikum. Jadi kita mereka tangan yang berbentuk macam robot-robot lah bagi dia orang seronok. Okey, jadi Mas Zikri, mari kita cuba tangan. Janganlah kita cuba dulu. Okey. Dia boleh tukar-tukar. Kita tak tahu besok tahun depan kot ada tangan yang lebih baik. Oh, best kan?
Seronok tak?
Oh, seronok. Jadi dia boleh tepuk tangan, kan? Dia boleh salam mak dia balik. Salam.
Sebagai ibu, saya rasa gembira, rasa bersyukur. Selagi saya mampu, saya akan usaha. Macam mana pun saya akan usaha sampai anak saya ini berjaya.
Tujuan kita memberi kanak-kanak ni tangan cetakan 3D ni sebenarnya untuk dia merasa dirinya tidak diabaikan ataupun terasing dari kanak-kanak lain. Mana belah petang ke kan? Okey, jadi jemari ni dia special sikit sebab kita menggunakan spring di dalam jari-jari ni. Sekarang saya menjalinkan smart partnership dengan EdTech Tapping. EdTech ni adalah pusat latihan teknologi tinggi. Setiap satu motor dia kawal satu jari. Kita hendak menghasilkan tangan cetakan 3D yang lebih baiklah di masa hadapan. 5 hari 2.
senyuman tu mahal kerana senyuman itu tidak boleh dijual beli.
Taking an afternoon break before continuing with the next plenary speech at 3:15 p.m. So the refreshments will be served outside the hall. Thank you. literary tradition. With that, please join me in welcoming Emeritus Professor Malakai. Please.
Thank you. I'm going to take away the mask so that you could hear me. I'm also a bit more comfortable without the mask while I'm talking. And I think you all are quite a good distance away from me. Just sanitize the microphone after I'm done. So once again, thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. And I'd like to thank Swinburne University, especially Dr. Christina Yin, for initiating this invitation. And I'm very happy to be here today for a number of reasons. This is a second Swinburne event that I am participating in. I have fond memories of Kuching, and I always enjoy returning to Kuching. So lots of good reasons. And of course, the most important reason is that I get to talk about the work that I do as a researcher, something which is very close to my passion, which is Malaysian literature and English. I made a very concerted effort that as a Malaysian writer, critic, academic, I would focus my research on Malaysian literature in English. And it started even before my PhD. So I wanted to, in a way, chart Malaysian literature in English. Also, I wanted to make it visible. Very often people ask, what's Malaysian literature in English? Do we really have Malaysian literature in English? So I found that a bit insulting at times, because we clearly have a literary tradition, but it was largely invisible. And that was one of the main reasons why I felt there was a need, there was a gap, yeah. And therefore, to address it, I decided that I would take it upon myself. So it's a kind of a one-man mission, but it's an important mission, and I think it has good implications for Malaysian writing in English. Right, so you might wonder, who is a bibliographer? I'm talking about the bibliographer as a researcher. So who then is a bibliographer? I'm sure you are very familiar with the word bibliography. Yeah, whenever we do any kind of academic writing, we have references, and these references are often drawn from certain bibliographies. And one of the things I often tell my students is, at the end of your essay or article, you don't really have a bibliography. What you have is references. But those references are probably drawn from different bibliographies. And so, to answer the question, who then is a bibliographer, what I did was I looked at 3 dictionaries, and they have some common meaning for who is a bibliographer. For example, it says he's an expert or she's an expert in bibliography, a compiler of bibliographies. And then the Collins Dictionary says something which I think is more important. It says a person who studies the history of books and their production. So a bibliographer is seen as a historian, is seen as a compiler, and someone who tracks the production of books. And so when we talk about bibliographies then, yeah, and how a bibliographer becomes a researcher, we look at 3 roles that a bibliographer plays. One is that he compiles data. Now, this data is then organized and made accessible. to people who want to know that information. What is important is that the raw data that the bibliographer gets, and later I'll tell you how I collected this raw data. This data has to be reworked into useful information, and this information then becomes knowledge to the consumer. Yep. So when we talk of a bibliography of Malaysian literature in English, that data that is available out there, yeah, all the publishers have catalogs, and in the catalogs you're going to find information that you can use, a bibliographer can use, and it says that the history of the books, and that is seen in terms of the year of publication. So if you want to find out when was the first Malaysian literary text published, which I think is a very important question for someone who's interested in Malaysian literature. Yeah, but then again, whatever I say of how I charted Malaysian literature in English, that can be used for any field, any specialization. So for example, if you are a doctoral student and you are looking at one as a certain field, you might be able to actually develop a bibliography, which means that you put in everything that you have found. Yeah, but eventually when you write your thesis, you'll only have that which you have used from that bibliography. Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to turn around a bit so I can see my slide. What it does and what is important is that this information must be accessible. If I have all that information and it's just with me, it's not going to serve any purpose. Yeah, and also if a bibliography is sitting in a library and nobody uses it, it's just information, it's of no use. So sometimes it's important to ask ourselves, how do we want to make this information accessible to people who are interested in the field that you are or we are working in? Yeah, so it's good to know that you have this historical account. We are making it visible so that people can have that knowledge about the development of the tradition. So in terms of the knowledge then, I said that besides collecting the data, you need to organize it. So when we talk of literary traditions, you will know that there are many genres, yeah, many genres. So you then have to decide which are the genres you want to keep. Development of an author. I will show you how we can look at the development of a writer or an author by looking at a bibliography, and also the lifespan of literary texts. If I were in a class, I'll probably ask my students, so how would you do this? And if you get it right, I'll give you a prize. I'm not going to do it here at a plenary session, but basically, how can you recognize the lifespan of literary texts? For example, if we look at the work of Shakespeare, there are many, many bibliographies on Shakespeare and his writing, you know, be it on tragedies, comedies, tragicomedies, sonnets, yeah. So it's been published and republished over hundreds of years. And then there's this idea of the folio, yeah. So if you were looking at literary text, you also want to know whether the text has a life. How many of the texts that were published in 1950 continue to be republished? That would be of interest to someone who is doing research. And I will share some personal anecdotes of how my work on bibliography helped me in my own PhD. Right. So we have established then that bibliographers are, in a way, historians. Yeah. They track the development or the progress of whatever field that you're looking at. They are the impartial keepers of records. I think the keyword there, and my pointer is not very good. The keyword there is impartial, meaning a bibliographer is not a critic. What he does or what she does, forgive me for using the male pronoun, I'm not very comfortable using the plural pronoun they when I'm referring to one person. Yeah, but what the bibliographer needs to do is be impartial. You're not a critic. You do not decide what is worthy or unworthy. As long as something is published, yeah, you need to keep a record of it. Now, the publishing world is an interesting world. When, you know, it's about power, who has accessibility to publishers. When writers were initially trying to get their work published, sometimes it's difficult to find a publisher, so they will self-publish. Many decades ago, writers actually wrote their self-publish. And therefore, you know immediately, oh, people say, oh, this could be vanity press. Maybe it's not worth putting in a bibliography. No, we do not have the right to do that. Largely because some of the greatest writers actually self-published first. For example, Virginia Woolf. She self-published. She and her husband published her work. And today we often say, oh, you know, that person is a self-published writer. There are good reasons why people self-publish. But nowadays, if you look at the copyright page inside, chances are they don't put self-published. They have their own company. And so you actually wouldn't know whether it's self-published or not unless you dig into the details about who the publisher is. Yeah. So the bibliographer, as a historian, has to state the facts. And of course, we don't trust all historians. Some historians are more trustworthy than others. But as someone who is a researcher, you need to be scientific, you need to be objective, and you must record that which is true and that which is published. So the role is not to evaluate or to criticize. The role is to record. So why do I have those words on above my, okay. So why do we need bibliographies? One of the things I said at the beginning of the talk was that there was a lack of visibility. People didn't know these works were out there and available. So to make it visible, we need to create this databases, this historical databases. And these databases should be accessible to scholars and researchers. Now, I don't know how many of you are into bibliographies. I'm probably one of those few people who have very boring lives and do bibliographies, sitting there and writing down things. But as a student in University Malaya, when I spent time in the library, one of the things I did was I found out the section where they actually had bibliographies available. And do you know what is the code? You know, the code for bibliographies is actually Z, right at the end of things. And if you go there, you find that they are very often not touched. Those books are there and dusty. Yeah. When I first published my bibliography and internet was available, I Google searched where my bibliography went. And I actually found that it was in a German university library. that pleased me to know and to know that, hey, my book is a bibliography is sitting in a German university library. So I went to see my friend who was then the manager of the University Malaya Co-op, and I asked her, how did that book end up in that university? So she actually said that libraries are interested in bibliographies, and that University of Malaya had a list every time an academic book came out, they automatically send them to hundreds of libraries. So that tells you the value that people put to having bibliographies. The question then is, are people going there and looking for bibliographies? That's something that probably now there are a number of ways of assessing bibliographies. I'll talk about that in a short while. Okay. This is called the new norm. Sorry. Something gone wrong? Okay, this is where you're supposed to tell a joke because this is the graveyard shift. 3 o'clock is not the best time to give a talk. Ah, here we are. And there we are. Oh, okay. Let's see. All right. So I'm going to talk to you about Malaysian literature in English because I'm charting this literary tradition. It's a relatively recent literary tradition. Malaysian literature is here. This is Malaysian literature in English. Malaysian literature in English is here because we have a variety of English which is known as Malaysian English. Yeah, Malaysian English is a valid variety. It has a standard and non-standard form. I'm not going to give you a lecture on Malaysian English, but what you need to know is because there is a variety of English known as Malaysian literature, Malaysian English, we have a variety of new literatures in English, which is called Malaysian literature in English. And it started very much in the early 50s in the University of Malaya, which was in Singapore initially. And it was publications that came by Malaysians, Malayans, because in the 50s there wasn't a Malaysia yet. And so you had both writers from Peninsula and also from Singapore. This is very much the West Malaysia, not very much part of Borneo yet. Yeah. So the genesis of MLE is 1950, 70 years old, quite young compared to the other literary traditions, which are hundreds of years old. Yeah. And so what we have is people who wrote in the 50s who are still writing today. 2 weeks ago, we had the competition for Malaysian poetry writing competition. Yeah, Malaysian poetry writing competition 2021. And you'll be very pleased to know that there were 2 Sarawakians who were in the top list. You know, so it's a great feeling that it's a Malaysian competition, and everybody from both from Sabah, Sarawak, and the Malay Peninsula were part of this. So the emerging writers you see in these young people who are writing, we have established writers. One of the judges for this competition was Mr. Wong Pui Nam, and he has been writing since 1950. He is one of our longest poetry writing, one of our longest writing poets, very eminent, wonderful poet. Not easy to read and therefore very often taught only at the university. So what's the purpose then of this bibliography? Now, the purpose of this bibliography is to establish what is this corpus, which is known as Malaysian literature in English. Yeah, what is and who is writing it. So we then say, when we talk about Malaysian literature in English, we say the keywords are Malaysian, writing in English. So we have to bear in mind who gets to be in the bibliography. So this is something that a bibliographer has to make a decision. And I decided that it should be Malaysian nationals. Okay. Now, Malaysian nationals alone might be a bit restrictive. So I said it'll also be Malaysian born writers who are now naturalized citizens in other countries, but still writing about Malaysia. So we have people like Shirley Lim, who lives in New York, still has preoccupations with Malaysia, right? Or writers who reside in Malaysia, though not Malaysian born, and have a preoccupation with Malaysia and things Malaysian. So this is where it becomes a little subjective. I had a phone call, no, not a phone call, I had a Facebook messenger from a writer, and she said to me, I'm going to be talking about Malaysian writing, and I'm going to say that I am not listed in your bibliography, although I am a Malaysian PR. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know she was a PR. So sometimes you don't know these things, yeah? But this writer made it a point to tell me that I'm a PR, shouldn't I be in your bibliography? And then I looked at her work. There is maybe one novel which is set in Malaysia, but much of her work is initially from India, and then they're quite universal and not necessarily Malaysian. And so you will offend some people, or there'll be others who say, I'm transnational, it's okay if I'm not in Malaysia. Bibliography, you do what you want. So again, this is why I said that what is important is that a bibliographer be honest and include what is considered Malaysian literature in English. Yeah. So MLE does not include writing by colonials and transient expatriates. For example, Anthony Burgess lived in Malaysia for some time, and then he wrote the Malaysian trilogy, but he's certainly not a Malaysian writer. We happen to be the setting for that Malaysian trilogy. He wrote dozens of writings and novels. And so to make claims like that would be a bit presumptuous, and people might think about, why claim people who were born abroad were transient. For example, Han Su-yin was here for a short while. We can't claim Han Su-yin to be a Malaysian writer. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Thank you. So when we begin to look at literary tradition, and especially when you're charting this tradition, you have to be aware of the publications and the accessibility of these publications. Sometimes you really cannot find, someone has it. And I'll tell you what I did to find some of these publications. One of the ways a literary tradition grows is through research and also scholarship on the literary works and the writers. Today, many Malaysian writers are studied in the master's research work and PhDs. My PhD was on K.S. Maniam and Lloyd Fernando. And interestingly, I did my PhD in the University of Nottingham in the UK. And there I found so much more material that was available than I would have actually found in Malaysia itself, and that is a problem sometimes. Yeah, and then of course, whatever research is done must be published, because you want this to be available in the academic journals, books, anthologies. Just now, as I was listening and also looking at my phone, multitasking as we often do, I found that Dr. Grace Chia from USM has just published on Malaysian literature in English. And it's so nice to see that there are critical works that are coming out, and there's also literary works in that, collection. The other thing that contributes to the growth of a literary tradition is how awards and recognitions are given to publications. Sadly, in Malaysia, we hardly have any recognition for writing in English because it is, and I can say this is how it is. If you want to consider your work part of national literature, national Malaysian literature, you must write in Malay. And if your work does get translated, they might look at it and say, oh, okay, but it's not going to make much difference because you had written in English. Yeah. And we only have international awards mostly available to Malaysians. Having said that, I must say that the government is not supportive in terms of giving awards. But for example, the Malaysian Publishers Association last year actually opened up a category in their annual awards to give for best book published in English language. And happily, 2 books on Malaysian literature were actually in that category. These 2 books were books that I had edited. One was Ronggeng Ronggeng, Malaysian Short Stories. The other was Melchin Testament, Malaysian Poems. And Melchin Testament went on to win that award. And both these books were the result of the research that I did on bibliography, on Malaysian writing, because while I was discovering all these books all these work that had been published from 1950s to 2015, I then decided, let me come up with anthologies, and Maya Press, who publishes my work, published both these works. And these books are actually used as textbooks. That's how a literary tradition grows, through publication, through accessibility. And the wonderful thing nowadays is that if you go to Shopee and type my name, you're going to find some of my books there. So besides buying all these lovely other things, buy Malaysian literary texts also. First time I saw my book in Shopee, I said, oh, bloody hell, what am I doing there in Shopee of all places? So undignified. But this is a new normal. You can't go to a bookshop, you go to Shopee and buy my books. Sorry for the swearing. That's what happens when I get excited. Right. So now when we look at the data on the bibliography, you have to make some decision of what data you want to collect. In our case, ours is a very short tradition. And so I decided what I will have and what I can have, because I was working very much on my own. The first time I did a bibliography, I had 1 or 2 friends who said, okay, we'll come with you and spend time with you, and then you can buy us coffee or something. So so you have to decide what goes in and what gets left out, and I'll talk a bit more in the next slide. The other thing is whether, when we talk about Malaysian literature in English, whether we want to put in translated works in that bibliography. Yeah, translated works, meaning works which are written in Malay and translated into English, written in Chinese, translated in English, Tamil, and other Indian languages which are translated into English. Do you want to put that in? And I'll tell you what I did in a short while. So what do I put in? So I decided that I will put in the 4 most popular genres. So poetry, short story, novel, and drama. These were also that which was most published. The less popular genres are memoirs, essay, autobiography, biography. Graphic novels are becoming more and more popular. Humor. You know, when you look at Matsum, for example, by Lut, it's bilingual. So that would be a graphic novel, and obviously one that captures Malaysian lives in a very wonderful way. Yeah. So I created my own parameters for my bibliography, and as such, it was limited to these 4 popular genres. So coming back to this idea of translated works, translated works are in themselves original works. They are recognized as original works. Translators actually win awards nowadays, good translation, yeah? So recognition of, one of the things is to recognize the contribution that the translator gives to the original work. Today I was working, this morning I was doing some work for my, this is advertisement, yeah, for my journal called Men Matters Journal. And there were some works which were translated from another language into English. So I had to write to the poet and say, please give me the biodata of the translator. We have to recognize that they are also involved in the creative process. Yeah. So this is what Itmar Evan Zohar says. He says, contribution of translation, it says, translation brings new ideas, items, characteristics that are introduced to a literature. So for example, if you look at Malaysian literature which is written in English, you'll find that what is available in the English literature might be quite different. For example, what the Malay writers, people like A. Samad Said, for instance, you know, his famous novel Salina, the issues that you see there, when translated into English, it was translated by Harry Eveling. And if you read that, all the cultural things that A. Samad Said wrote in Malay is now available in English. So these translation, when written in English, gives a new dimension to Malaysian literature in English. Now, again, bibliographers have to struggle with that issue. Do I want to put in translation, or do I just want to keep it to original writing in English? When I first did the volume, I made a decision. Second, I made another decision. And while I'm working on the 3rd edition, I'm struggling again. Okay, so when we talk about Malaysian writing in English, translated in English, it means authors translated works from original into English, or Malaysian translation works of writings from the other languages. Yeah, from original languages, actually what I meant was Chinese, Tamil, and the other languages. Okay, so what are the sources of translation? If you're a bibliographer, you need to know where to go find it. So in the case of Malay, and because it's supported by Malay, by the government, yeah, you find that Dewan Bahasa and Pustaka is one, Institute of Language and Literatures. They translate Malay works into English. The other is the Malaysian National Institute of Translation, which is very closely linked with Dewan Bahasa and Pustaka. But interestingly, they translate Malay works into English, but they rarely or never translate English works or Chinese works or Tamil works into Malay. That's the kind of hegemonic relationship we have in this country. And we are in the 21st century. Okay, so what are the other sources of English translations? They would be the small publishers and also self-publications. There aren't too many big publishers who are translating from other languages into English. Okay, now the bibliographical research on Malaysian literature in English, I believe, started with the work that I was doing in the late 1980s. And then when I went off to do my PhD, I stopped for a while. When I came back, I spent more time on the bibliography, and we published the first Malaysian bibliography in English in 2001. And then, the thing is, the minute you publish a bibliography, it becomes outdated because there's constant publication of text. So it stops at 2001, and then I went on to publish my next bibliography in 2016, almost 15 years. And Susbuddy and Maya Press are related. Maya Press is a press that is an imprint of Susbuddy. I'm sure if you are students at some time or another, you would have had some workbook from Susbuddy. So they are a huge company, and Maya Press is their literary press which supports Malaysian writing in English, which is a wonderful thing. So, all research needs funding, and there aren't many people who want to fund your research when it's bibliography. It doesn't have social impact, but it does have academic impact. Yeah. So the first edition was actually, I got some funding of 1,000 ringgit from the British Council. Here we are trying to get rid of our colonial masters, and they are giving me money to do research in English. So I said, thank you very much, and use the money. And the second edition, by this time I was already at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, and I received 1.5 thousand ringgit for research. And that money was used for 2 interns. 2 of my undergraduate students during summer semester worked with me and helped me put it together, do the proofreading and everything else. So the second publication was in 2016. And at the moment, there isn't any funding. And so it's very much a labor of love, something that I continue to do. And of course, I'm going to do some professional begging, and hopefully somebody will fund me to have a couple of research assistants. Okay, so that's how the first bibliography looked at. Yes, and it has all the titles of the some of the titles of Malaysian publications are there. So how did I collect it? It was, those were the pre-internet days. So I literally had to go and go through journals. And fortunately, I have some good connections. The late Professor Lloyd Fernando, who was my professor, was a good friend. Let me use his personal library to sit there. And I used to write in the notebook all these details, go back home, and then begin to transcribe them. And of course, when I look at master's theses or PhD theses, if they were on Malaysian literature, you go in and look at what are the sources. The Co-op bookshop I mentioned to you earlier is also an important source, as was MPH. This is before Kinokuniya and all the other bookshops came along. And in terms of library, University Malaya. And fortunately, I did my first degree and second degree in so they kind of know me and allow me in as an alumnus. And this is the second edition of the bibliography, which came out in 2016. We launched it at the Georgetown Literary Festival, which was quite a nice thing because here was all the records of people's work, which we were celebrating, which we were also providing as historical documents. So because bibliographers are historians, that is a historical document at that time. So this time, I had both traditional sources like, what I used for the first edition, and new sources through the internet. There were online literary journals, writers' blogs and websites, publishers' websites, for instance, and also databases on writers' communities. I don't know whether you're familiar with the Malaysian writers group on Facebook, for instance. They also provide a lot of information. And most importantly, communication with writers. I often go into social media and say, look, if you have published something, please give me the details. And some people are very generous. They even send me a copy of the book because they're quite pleased to have their work in a bibliography. Yeah. So again, I think this is available on Shopee if you're interested. 20 ringgit. I get 10% as royalty. Academic whoredom, where you get money for your products. We're not moving. Okay, we are. Okay, so organizing the data. Remember, the raw data has to be organized. So either according to the genre, the year of publication. If you do, some things are more clumsy than others. Going by author, some people have a whole bibliography. I mean, depending on the volume of your publication. If you are a very prolific writer, like, if you were a prolific writer like Shakespeare or Dickens, because many of the great writers, they would have a bibliography on the original works and then all the studies that have been carried out on them. Yeah, we haven't quite arrived on that for Malaysian literature yet. So the rationale that I used for organizing my bibliography was the ease of retrieval of information. How easily can you do it? And the data has to be information, and that information, when processed into useful knowledge, I always believe that until that information becomes meaningful, until it becomes meaningful, it serves no purpose. Yeah, it's just data. So in organizing the database for this literary tradition, I felt because we are generally a new tradition, the best was to go according to genre. Yeah. And then also for each genre, you present it in alphabetical order. And that is not an easy task. It is not an easy task because we are a multicultural, multi-ethnic society. And so if we go by the British tradition of surname, there are some people don't have surnames. I don't have a surname. I'm Malachi Edwin Vedamani, anak lelaki Vedamani. But following the British tradition, I use Vedamani as my surname and then Malachi Edwin as my first and second name. And there isn't going to be, I have two sons and their names are Julian Matthew Edwin. It's neither my first name nor my father's name. It's my middle name because I didn't want to punish them by having the name Malachi put in there because Malachi is such a difficult name for Malaysians. I get called Malachi and Mala whatever. So I said, I've suffered enough. Don't inflict it on your sons. And so Malay names also do not have surnames. Chinese names work very easily. You could put Tan, comma, whatever the name, that two other names that follow. Nowadays, there's only one name sometimes. And then people ask you, what's your surname? So we had to make sure, sometimes the author will say, please do not use my father's name because that's my father. My father didn't write the book. Subramaniam didn't write the book. Somebody else did, that kind of thing. So, but we tell them, for the sake of uniformity, this is how the Malaysian names will be given in alphabetical order. And people may not agree with you. Okay, so looking at the author's profile, how they're published, you can actually find out the kind of how they have emerged as writers or how they have contributed to a genre. Okay, so for example, if you look at this is a genre-focused bibliography. I think this is the second or third page in the bibliography. So it has Adiba Amin, the year of birth, 1936. And in 2006, she wrote the novel called The End of the Rainbow, and it was published in Penang. So you know where the publishers are. And then I have a few other names. And then we have Anwar Ridwan, and he wrote The Last Days of an Artist, published by Dewan Bahasa and Pustaka, and I mentioned who translated it. Yeah, and then in 2004, two of his works were translated into English. And after a while, you'll also know who are the more prominent translators. For example, Harry Eveling used to translate a lot of Malaysian writing into English. In fact, I just bought a book where he translated the Malay Ramayana into English. And then we have Soleha Ishaq from UKM, also a very important translator. Wasuntara Nadaraja, someone who I'm not very familiar with in terms of her work. Oh, come on. Okay. Now, this is an entry based on a text. For example, Ki Tuan Chai. Ki Tuan Chai is known as a dramatist. He writes plays. But this is a poem, a figure forgotten in hours not of need, is a poem that has been published many times. It was originally published in 1980 in a journal. Very often, poems go through a life where they're first published in a journal, and then somebody comes along and picks it up. So K.S. Maniam and Shanmugalingam put his work in the Anthology of Malaysian Poetry. Surprise, surprise, it was actually published by Dewan Bahasa and Pustaka. I think they published one, probably that was it. After that, there were some politician must have complained, so they stopped publishing. That's how it worked in this country, yeah. And then I republished it in a volume called Insights. And Insights was a volume of poems that we published just for students, yeah, things that they could deal with. And then in 2014, Ghulam Sarwar Yusof published the same poem. And in 2017, I published it in another collection called Malchin Testament, the one that I talked to you about just now. Now, when you look at this, although it's organized in the different years when it was published, one thing it tells you that this poem has a life. It started in 1980, and in 2017, 27 years later, 17 years later, or is it 27? My maths isn't wonderful. How many years later? 37? Anyone? Come on, you guys are technology people. Okay. 1980 to 2017, how many years is that? It's about, what, 37 years? So this poem has a 37-year life, and people are still reading it today. But what you don't see there is this information. If you were studying Ki Tuan Chai as a poet, if you looked at this information, when it was first published in 1980, yeah, he wrote the final draft in 1980. And then in 2014, Ghulam Sarwar Yusof republished it. Now, I know Tuan Chai's work quite well, and I also know him as a person. So when I read the same poem, it felt that, hey, this is something slightly different. And I've discovered that he had actually reworked it slightly. And in another poem, not in Figure Forgotten, not in Hours of Need, he actually has a different version. When he first wrote that poem, he makes reference to Dallas and JR. I think this is before many of you were born, when Dallas was a very popular American series. Now, when it was republished in 2014, he changed it to now vampires are sexy and beautiful, because that's what has happened, right? All these werewolves and vampires have become so attractive that you don't mind them draining you of your blood and do things to you that you want other people to do for or whatever. Yeah, so poets also do these changes. when I was studying Lloyd Fernando, I knew that there were two editions. Yeah, one was Scorpion Orchid was first published in 1976. This is when I can give you all the dullest information. And then it was published again in 1993. But I was looking at a certain quote in 1993, sorry, in 1976. And because I was also using 1993, I couldn't find that quotation. He had actually reworked the original text. So people who are doing historical studies, literary studies, will find information like this. It's not visible out here, but when you look at the different publications, yeah, this is only in 37 years. The things that have happened to much older classics, yeah, especially great plays and great poems, how people have changed, how it has been changed. Because sometimes what happens is the poet publishes it, and then after he's dead, somebody goes through his documents and they find, oh, this is a later or earlier edition. So it becomes interesting when you do bibliographical work to find out information like this. I find it very exciting. Like I said, I live a very boring life. Right. This is my colleague in UPM, Dr. Shivani Sivagurunathan. This is an author-focused bibliographical information. What I did was I took all her poems that were published, I took all her short stories that were published, and also this year she published a novel. So if you want to look at how Shivani Sivagurunathan has developed over the years, you can say that her first poem that was published, okay, in a reputable publication, when I said, because a lot of us also wrote and published in our school magazines and everything else, I'm sure Shivani did too. Now in 2001, she published her first poem. All those things that you see in black are her poems. Yeah. So from 2000, she started out as a poet. Then, oops, then, okay, then she published a collection of short stories. Yeah. So by looking at the bibliography, you know that she started as a poet, then she published her short stories in 2011. 10 years later, she was writing short stories, but at the same time, she was also publishing poems. 2012, she published, and then 2017, her work was republished. And 2013 and 2013, she published 2 short stories. And in 2021, Shivani published her novel called Yalpanam by Penguin Random House. On Sunday, I can give her some publicity because she's a good friend. She was featured in the New Straits Times under Sunday Vibes. Yeah, so please Google and find out what she's writing about. Her book is also available in Shopee. Yes, you don't have to go looking for it. You know, when I was walking in Kuching a few years ago and I saw Kedai Buku, I said, oh, let me go see. They only had stationery. Worse still, I went into a Kedai Buku and they were selling clothes. So, you know, bookshops are all dying, so you have to go online. Okay, so coming back to Shivani, a bibliography, let's say you decide that I like Shivani's writing and I want to do research on her. A bibliography will help you do that. So and we looked at how, you know, author focus, text focus, bibliographical information helps. Oh, come on. Okay, you have to beg this. So what's the future then of bibliographical work? If I died 2 days later, will there be, I'm sure somebody will take up the torch. Yeah. Nowadays, because I mentioned, you know, because the minute you publish a bibliography, it becomes outdated. What we have are online bibliography becoming an option. Then you have to decide where are you going, which website are you going to use? For example, would I put it in my own personal website because it's my intellectual property, or would I put it in a public website like maybe at the University of Nottingham, if they are willing to maintain it? Yeah, you need funding, maintenance, you need an online website person to, like a webmaster to deal with it, probably an academic. What the National University of Singapore has done is they have on their website a bibliography which is online. And Professor Koh Tai An, has she is the academic who maintains and runs this. Okay, maybe I have a minute to tell you a story. Professor Koh Tai An was in Malaysia for a conference, and she made this statement. She said, there are no novels in English by Malay authors. It's all written by non-Malay authors. This was about 20 years ago. And during Q&A, I put up my hand and I said, Taiwan, I'm sorry, I think you've got it wrong because in 1970, blah, 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 somebody named this person, published, the price has been high. She looked at me and said, no, that's not true. I said, I have a bibliography. And because I did my work on bibliography, I could actually challenge a foreign academic and say, I think you got it wrong. And later she sent me a message saying, yeah, you're right, I missed that one. That's what bibliographies are all about, getting that information right. And I think that's not because you want to prove somebody wrong, but because you want Malaysian writing to be visible. And also we need to broaden the scope of bibliographies, include other genres. And the addition that I'm working now with some of my former students is to annotate each novel so that you have some information about what the novel is, so you can decide whether you want to go looking for it. I think that's conclusion. Yes. So I think bibliographies are essential, yeah, as a researching tool, and also because we are still growing, it's important that this data is available, and you can decide how you want to organize the bibliography. I have a feeling the last 45 minutes or so, you heard the word bibliography so much in want to make you throw up, but I do love that word. Oh, come on. Thank you. Right. If you have any questions, I'll be very pleased to address them, whether you're physically present and also those who are online. Please feel free to ask any questions. Do we have any questions from the online?
Waiting.
Okay.
But I have just one question.
Sure.
So since you talk about online bibliography, do you have any plans for because your current publication is a traditional book form, do you have plans for an online version?
Yeah, I certainly want to put it online. And because the University of Nottingham, I'm very closely affiliated to it, I'm talking to the school. I'm hoping that we can put it online, and it probably will go on to the School of English, where if you go to the School of English, one of the things in the menu will be a Malaysian bibliography. Yeah, because I'm affiliated to Nottingham for Life since I'm their emeritus professor. So I would like to think that at least there'll be life for the bibliography, something that will be good for future researchers and writers. Yeah.
So actually, to follow up on that, I'm quite interested to know that, because you said as a bibliographer, your role is trying to bring forth, bring all these works to people to make it known,
yes.
Right? And so, and you've mentioned how the published bibliography usually are found in very isolated, secluded part of the library, and so how do we change that? Because right now with the digital generation, how do we make use of the digital technology to make this more?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. Nowadays, if you go into a university library and you look around and say, "Oh my God, is this a library?" Because there are hardly any books on the shelves. If you go to University Malaya, it's the oldest library, and I love the smell of old books. But then again, bibliographies are somewhere there. And one of the things I've said is making it accessible. So what the National University of Singapore has done to have their bibliography online is the direction that we need to take, not because we want to copy what Singapore is doing, because that is the way, easy retrieval of information. What does happen nowadays is if you Google certain writers, you might get pieces of information. But a good bibliography, and if it is an online bibliography, you could search and very easily retrieve. Yeah, one of the things we teach our undergraduates is how best to use the library, how best to retrieve information, and how importantly to recognize and to properly cite this work. And so I think bibliographies will contribute towards that. Very interestingly, when the bibliography came out, the Sun Yat-sen University in Kaohsiung invited me to talk to them about this because people are interested in bibliography, and there aren't many big bibliographers around. Yeah. Thank you. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the audience? No? Yeah, so I think that's all. Thank you so much, Professor, and we will proceed to the next.
Thank you so much. Could you sanitize this because I didn't use my mask? But it's online.
Yeah, it's online, yes.
Okay.
So there's no worry.
All right.
Thank you, Professor Malakai. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we are already approaching the end of the program for day one. Now I would like to invite the final plenary speaker for the day, Associate Professor Tan Chin Ike, the Chairperson at Game Development Council of Malaysia and Head of School of Computing and Creative Media, University of Wollongong, Malaysia, to deliver the plenary speech titled Gamifying Gamification, How to Use the Social Competitive Gameful System for the Gamification of Teaching and Deliver. With that, please give your attention to Associate Professor Tan and join me in welcoming him.
Very good evening. Can you all hear me loud and clear?
Yes, Professor. Yes.
Yeah, is my audio on? Hear me? Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Professor.
All right, okay, so it's loud and clear, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Yes, yeah, so I'm given an hour to share. Problem with that is I never know how long or how short to share. Now, before I start, let me just share my content. And you guys can just let me know if you can see everything. Yeah. Can you all see my slides? Yeah. Okay, if you can see my slides, just wave your hands up there. I can see all of you guys. All right. Okay, awesome. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is if you hear me suddenly pick up pace, it basically means that I'm running short of time. Yeah, being an academic, I have no firewall in my mouth and I tend to ramble on. All right. So yeah, my title today is Gamifying Gamification. Well, the concept of gamification has really taken off during the pandemic. Now, before I start, I just want to see a show of hands. How many of you guys here are actually academics or lecturers or instructors in any capacity? Yeah, just wave your hands if you're there. or just say yes if you're there. All right. Yeah, so online classes has really taken its toll. Yeah, I mean, one of the most difficult things for online lectures is basically to figure a way to make classes as engaging, as immersive as possible. And some students, I mean, I don't know how you run the classes, but majority of my students just refuse to turn on their webcam. It could be one of those generation things. Yeah, so you guys know what gamification is. I'm sure some of you actually use gamification. And gamification is the use of games design elements, basically for non-game purposes. Yeah, for non-game purposes. So that's gamification. Gamify, on the other hand, is basically the applying typical elements of gameplay. So you can have things like point scoring, competition, rules of play, UX, UI, narrative, yeah, and we apply all those to an activity, typically as activities such as online marketing techniques, basically to encourage engagement with a product or services, yeah. And you might think, isn't gamify the same thing as gamification? Well, the thing about gamifying something is to turn an activity or task into a game or something resembling a game. So basically, to gamify is a method of making gamification more video game centric. It's going back to the basics. All right. So at this point, some of you may have some question marks. So allow me to bring you on a little journey. Okay. So I'm going to skip this part here. I've been introduced. All right. So yeah, games have been around for a long time now. So that's stating the obvious, right? Video games is a modern day entertainment construct, while play is a natural construct. So let's tackle video games first, yeah? Not sure how many of you are familiar with the history of video games. In the late 50s, yeah, a young nuclear physicist by the name of Willie Higginbotham, yeah, that's a pretty unusual name, Willie Higginbotham, at the Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York, invented what is known as the first video game. Yeah, he used an oscilloscope, and he created this game called Tennis for Two. And he basically paved the way for this guy called Stephen Russell, a student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, to program the very first interactive computer game called Space Wars. And this was in 1962. Now, the first commercial video game appeared only in the 70s, yeah, or about 1972, 1976, and that was basically Pong, yeah. But Willie Higginbotham in the late 50s created the first video game, while Steve Russell and Space Wars was the first computer game. All right, so video games is basically a modern entertainment construct. And this thing, I'm not sure how many of you have heard of this chap called Chris Crawford. Yeah, he's a renowned American video games designer and also co-founder of the Game Development Conference, GDC. Yeah, so Chris Crawford once posed this question: why do people play games, and what motivates them to do so? So let's address the first part. If we want to know how to truly make gamification work, we need to understand the why behind this question. Why do people play games? Now, there are many schools of thoughts on the notion of play. There are some that believe that play is actually a learned ability. It's a learned ability. And it's a non-essential part of biology and survival. But there are some who actually believe that play is actually a universal characteristic in evolutionary and a biological human behavior. In fact, some of them actually believe that it's so central to early development because it contributes to humanity's social, physical, and emotional well-being. Yeah, so play is a natural construct. Let's understand it a bit further, right? I'm not sure how many of you have heard of Jane McGonigal, yeah, very famous games designer and games researcher. And she made this quote, yeah, when we play video games, we have a real sense of optimism. yeah, in our abilities and opportunities to get better and succeed. So that's the first key point. Yeah, let's commit it to memory. Okay, we have a real sense of optimism in our abilities and our opportunities to get better and succeed. Yeah, and more physical and mental energy to engage with difficult problems. 2 points. Yeah, so studies have shown that when people play video games, yeah, and brain scans show that the most active parts of our brains when we play video games are 2 things. One is the rewards pathway system, which is associated with motivation and goal orientation, and the hippocampus, which is associated with learning and memory. So 2 parts. One is motivation and goal orientation, and the other part is with learning and memory. Some people have said when you exercise, your body releases chemicals such as dopamine, right? That's why some people actually find exercising really, really fun. It's a really engaging activity. Me, not so much, okay? And dopamine addiction is somewhat like a nectar, right, to our primal pleasures of our brains, yeah, or what we call addiction. So you can get addicted to exercise. I wish I can get addicted to exercise, right? Angry Birds is an example of dopamine for video games, yeah. When you play Angry Birds, I'm not sure how many of you have played Angry Birds. Yeah, if you can raise your hands if you have played, it would be fantastic. All right, so there was an author that said, you know, every time where he took the bird, the various types of bird, he pulled back the catapult and he threw it at those green pigs. There is a sense of pleasure, yeah, a satisfaction that comes about from killing those little pigs that stole the eggs, right? And that dopamine is released, and as well as dopamine is endorphins. Yeah, endorphins are released in your brain that makes you feel happy. So when you exercise and when you play games, yeah, chemicals, your body releases chemicals. All right. So what does this tell you? It tells you that the human brain is wired to receive instant or crave instant gratification, fast pace, and unpredictability. All 3 are satisfied in video games. Okay, so in a way, play is a huge part of the human experience that has not only given us pleasure, but helped us form society and culture, which in turn, arguably, has helped humanity's survival as a dominant species. So yeah, when you play, you get rewarded and you learn, just as Jane McGonigal said, right? A real sense of optimism in our abilities and our opportunities to get better and succeed, the reward part, and the more physical and mental energy to engage with difficult problems, yeah, the learning part. So motivation and learning is actually an important survival element. And playing is also nature's way of getting us to learn. The instinct to play is an innate way for all humans and animals to learn. Let's go to that. All right, so I have these 3 definitions here: play, games, and sports. Yeah, play is basically an unstructured activity. Games is basically a minimally structured form of activity, and sports is arguably a highly structured form of physical activity. Now, remember the last slide I said games is a nature's way of learning. Yeah, so you can see the little picture on top. Yeah, animals play. All right, animals play from young. Puppies play. Kittens play. Yeah. Let's get the definition out of the way first. Youngsters are very creative when they engage in play. All right, kids instinctively know how to play. They don't need any coaches. They don't need clinics. They don't need someone to tell them how to play. They don't need a scoreboard up there. They don't need any cheerleaders. Kids know how to play. If any of you have kids or babies, you leave them down, they will automatically figure a way to play with something. Most of the time, they'll play with something that you don't want them to play with. All right. So play is a physical activity in the purest form. Now, play does not have to be physical in the sense of sports, but it involves a physical output. When you play, when kids play, they can take 2 action figures, they can play with action figures. There is a mental activity going on and a physical activity going on. So it involves a physical output. You see, from an evolutionary and biological point of view, it's actually not immediately obvious, right, why animals and humans spend so much time on recreation and play. In humans, as well as any animals, all right? Play is actually, time spent playing is actually time not spent looking for food lah, all right? Sorry, I just want to just double check. You can see the slides here, right? I hope I'm showing the right slides. Could you just possibly just tilt the camera to the slides, I mean to the screen, so I know what the audience is seeing as well? You're seeing this, right? Yikes. Yikes. Yeah, just take a short time, maybe for the camera panning. All right, yeah, okay. Thank you so much, cameraman. Yeah. Yeah, so time not spent playing is actually time not looking for food, yeah? And this behavior cannot simply be an evolutionary side effect or a genetic accident. We're not talking about your appendix, for example. Yeah, appendix serves no purpose, or it used to serve a purpose, now it doesn't, right? So play is actually a huge part of the human experience, especially amongst the young. So thus, there must be a value in it. Okay, so people and animals play in order to for social ranking. Yeah, we figure out what is our animals play to figure out what their social rank is. They play to learn the social rules. Humans as well. Your babies will know what is, or toddlers will know what can or cannot be done. Yeah, what their boundaries are. For example, if they were to in a shopping center, they don't pull down their pants and pee in public. They will learn, yeah, social rules. They play as practice. That's what animals do. The animals play to learn hunting skills. They play in order to improve motor coordination, the hand-eye coordination. We animals and humans play in order to bond amongst siblings, amongst parents with children. We play with our kids in order to bond. All right. We play to manage stress. All right. Sometimes when work has become too stressful, we play to release stress. So for both humans and animals, play is a low risk way or method also to develop our cognitive abilities. Games, on the other hand, can either be competitive or cooperative. It may be physical entirely, or it may involve some mental elements. Games such as card games, board games, chess is purely mental. Yeah, it requires your mental faculties. All right. Basketball, football is more physical. So play in itself may not need physical tools or rules. Yeah, play, but games does. Yeah, games there is some semblance of tools. Chess, when you play a game of chess, when you play card games, or rules when you even play games such as hopscotch, or not sure how many have watched Squid Games. Yeah, all those games that they play, childhood games, require some rules or some tools. So from an academic standpoint, right, these 3 words have very distinctive meanings. So we watch our kids climb trees, throw rocks, build Lego, that's play. As they age, we play with them catching, we buy them a football so they can play with other kids, you know, those are games. We play board games with them. And as they grow older, they run for their school, they run for their houses, they represent their houses, and those are basically sports. Definitions aside, I will use play and games interchangeably for the next couple of slides. So I'm checking the time now. If you see suddenly my voice start to speed up, it's because I'm trying to fit everything in as much as possible. If I'm going too fast, just raise your hands or comment in the chat there. All right. So academic studies have shown that certain competitive games, if used properly, can promote pro-social behaviors and skill development. And this applies to animals as well. Okay. Nowadays, the global concept of play, right, has evolved into team sports, yeah, which may be a form of entertainment. But tens of thousands of years ago, competitive behaviors was a critical aspect of survival. Play, fighting, and team sports help the young hunter-gatherers, yeah, to learn skills required or needed for raids, hunts later in life. In fact, one of the oldest recorded forms of sports, right, was bull leaping, yeah, in the Greek island of Crete, yeah, where slaves jumped over the horns of bull, and if they jump over and they die, they die. If they jump over and they get injured or not successful, they will slowly learn and learn and learn. In fact, the ancient Greeks were such lovers of sports, they taught it to their children at school. Yeah, and this was one of the first examples of sports being practiced at a very young age. Yeah, the main activities those days were wrestling, running, jumping, throwing the discus, javelin, ball games, gymnastics, and riding, which were all necessary physical skills needed to build muscles, stamina, and coordination. More importantly, military skills. Yeah. So competitive sports and games were created those days to not only bring people together, either socially to watch, like the Colosseum, yeah, gladiatorial games, or to actually participate in. Also to help them settle disputes, conflicts in a very, very organized manner. So games have been around for a very long time. Okay, Jane McGonigal also said this: games are a great way to tell each other what we are good at and what we want to appreciate it for and what we value in each other. So it's only recently, I think, sociologists and psychologists are beginning to unravel the mystery of why our capacity and our desire to play is so powerful. According to research, right, all humans have a capacity of a basic psychological need that is perpetually operating in our lives. And this need is for us to provide an avenue to show how good we are, show our proficiency and competency in physical and sometimes mental activities. So in other words, it's an avenue for us to puff up our chests, yeah, and show off. So really, right, games are also about victory and being a winner. It's for us to assert dominance. In short, it's for us to shout out what we are good at and that we are good at something. So let's wrap it up. Why do people play games? It's very simple. We play because it's an innate biological action. We play because it's an evolved social construct. And we play because it's fun. Yeah. According to Dutch historian Johan Huizenga, I think, yeah, he says that play needs to be internally motivated and most importantly fun. Okay, and fun is basically a subjective. It's very subjective. Yeah, fun can be purely entertainment related. Fun can be about winning. Fun can be about participating. Fun can be about that social aspect. But people play games because of these three things. Number one, it's our innate biological action. Number two, evolved social construct. Yeah, we are evolved. We are hardwired to play. And number three, we play most importantly because it's fun. So remember what we said just now about games being all about a victory and being about a winner and to assert dominance and fun and it's internally motivated. Yeah. So people of all ages, right, play games for different reasons. Video games serve a purpose and everyone plays for a reason. A lot of gamers or people who play a lot of games will always throw around this term called escapism when talking about their hobby. But this is actually a very, very hollow explanation for what actually motivates us to play game. Yeah. In fact, if you look at it, to escape, right, the word escape contains some negative connotation, suggesting those who play games feel a need to break away from the mundane slavery of life. Okay. Well, in a way, we enjoy retreats to other realities, some of it more fantastical than our own lives, but we aren't always driven to play games because we are trying to escape our lives. The real motivation for play is far more complex, and video games fulfill a lot of the real world human needs in a positive way. All right, so games build a sense of accomplishment and achievement, and let's go into that. Now, I'm sure all of you are familiar with this, yeah? Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all right? So basically, there is this person called Dr. Scott Rigby, who is a clinical and social psychologist, and he said that all humans have a basic psychological needs, and these needs are perpetually operating, yeah? So if you look at this model, right, this model is represented through these hierarchical levels within a pyramid-like structure, from the bottom levels being the need to be satisfied before the individuals can attain to the other needs. So the bottom two levels deal with necessities such as survival, physical, and emotional well-being. Yeah, if you go for the physiological needs, this is what humans need to survive: food, shelter, security, sleep, and clothes. And of course, there's now the sixth one, which is called Wi-Fi or data. Okay, that's just a joke, by the way. Yeah. So the bottom two deals with essential needs, while the upper three levels deals with influence, a sense of belonging, right? Self-development, self-esteem, and most importantly, at the highest, self-actualization. Maslow breaks down the esteem needs, right, into two distinct categories. Esteem for yourself, which covers attributes such as dignity, achievement, and mastery. And the second esteem is a desire for reputation, or to seek out respect, which cover attributes such as achieving status, independence, and prestige. Yeah, esteem is what we're going to focus at right now. So Dr. Scott Rigby went one step. Yeah, he said the esteem needs can be summarized into three areas: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Now, I'm going to pull it all back and go into gamification in a short while. Okay, so competence, we feel a need to be competent or successful even. Yeah, it's an innate desire, right, to seek out control and mastery over a particular situation. Not only that, maybe skill, a particular moment, or a particular knowledge. We want to master something. Yeah, there is this perpetual desire, right, to feel and achieve a sense of growth and accomplishment in our lives, whether at work or at play. Yeah, autonomy basically is a sense of independence and a sense of having a certain degree of control in our lives and actions. Okay, and this is primarily why humans crave freedom, and why the loss of autonomy, in a sense when we are imprisoned or we are enslaved, is actually construed as a form of punishment to a lot of humans. Yeah, so autonomy. And last of all, relatedness, the desire to feel as though we are significant and that we matter to others. So competence is the mastery, while relatedness is we feel that we have to matter one way or another yeah, that we are significant. Yeah, it's a desire to feel as though we have made some significant contribution to not only the community but society in general. Yeah, games have this ability to tap into these three fundamental psychological needs. Okay. So yeah, over the centuries, we have actually gravitated in towards experiences that makes us feel competent, more autonomous, yeah, and more related. Because these experiences, right, all these three needs makes us feel good about ourselves and keeps us it keeps us mentally healthy, so to speak. Yeah, and sociologists are now beginning to understand that video games is one of the most seductive of these activities because they fulfill our psychological needs more efficiently than any other activity, like work, for example. Yeah, I mean, work and play look alike. They do have these three psychological needs, but a game's narrative, for example, the story of the game, the whole purpose of playing games, makes our choices feel significant enough lah, that we buy into the game emotionally. Yeah, and games have this feedback mechanism that encourages us to keep working, to keep playing the game. All right, and most importantly, games is entertaining. It's fun. Yeah, work also can be fun to some of us, but we actually don't go like, today I'm stressed, I'm feeling very stressed out, let's go do small work. Yeah, let's do more work. I don't think a lot of people do that, but people do say like, I'm so stressed today, let's go and play some games. Yeah, video games or even golf or sports. Yeah, in a way to release stress. All right, so people play games, okay, because it is more consistent and rewarding players. It provides a diversity of choice, and it provides a social platform for engagement. So when used correctly, video games and the concept of video games hold the potential to show us the world through different sets of lenses, to craft experiences that engages our mind, both cognitively and socially as well. And games have this way of ultimately making us feel like we are an active participant in shaping our destiny. When you play games such as MMORPG, World of Warcraft, PUBG, Mobile Legends, Call of Duty Ghosts, Final Fantasy 15, it feels as though we are actively participating in that games. Games are also immediately rewarding, providing us with instant feedback whenever we do something right. When we do something right, it tells us we do something right. It gives us a reward. A lot of kids are playing games because of that, because of the instant gratification, the instant feedback. When you take away the games equation in life, right, in their childhood experiences, in their family, even if they do something right, they don't get complimented immediately. So is it any wonder why young people goes to games? Because they get the immediate feedback. Yeah, they get the gratification immediately. Right? Video games, in other words, excel at setting clear goals and allowing and showing, yeah, a player's progression through these goals. And above all, it's entertaining. Yeah, and it not only allows us to know how well we did, but more importantly, to show others how well they did as well, or how well we did. Remember, it's all about puffing out the chest, showing off, and telling other people how well you did. Yeah. So, why do people play games? And what motivates us to do so? Okay. How do we tie this all back down to gamification? All right, so there are two types of games. Yeah, I'm going to go very quickly because I'm running out of time. Two types of games. We call it games for entertainment and games for non-entertainment. Yeah, so video games fall under the games for entertainment. Different people have different concept of this terminology. Serious games is basically serious games are designed for an instructional purpose. They use entertainment tools to focus on solving and overcoming challenges lah. Yeah, serious games are there to create or to elicit a change or a reinforcement in behavior. All right. So some people believe that game-based learning and education games fall under serious games. Some people believe that it's apart from serious games. Serious games focus more on simulations and training, whereas game-based learning and education games focuses more on educations. All right. Gamification is sort of away from both games for entertainment and non-entertainment purposes. Why? Because serious games, game-based learning and education games uses the game's tools. That means we use the game engines. Yeah, we use a game itself. Gamification is the use of the game concept in a non-game setting. It does not have to be within a game. It can be outside a game. All right. So HR proponents can use gamification. Classrooms can use gamification as well. All right. So I'm just going